to show such a behavior that helps us to overcome the discomfort. So people usually they get pleasure with the help of satisfying their needs, be it simple needs or complex needs, such as through food, through drinks, through other drives, through life instincts. And see, Freud had also talked about two parts in pleasure principle. One is the eros, and the other is the thanatos. Eros is a life instinct. In eros, we are emphasizing more on sexual drives, on sexual instincts for sexual gratification. Whereas in Thanatos, we are talking more about death instinct, like maybe killing someone for satisfaction or safety, and both lead to pleasure principle. So our body is quite tough and strong, but in one way or the other, either it will be inclined towards showing Thanatos or it will be inclined towards showing Eros, and it becomes very vulnerable and it keeps reminding us about our weaknesses. So, the second source of suffering is the outer world. So, one is the inner source of suffering, which is our vulnerable body, which works on the pleasure principles, and those instincts only make our body vulnerable, which is one of the pressures, which, or the sufferings that help us to overcome that suffering. And the second is the external world, which makes our suffering even more, and it has the capability to threaten people by the events. And those external sufferings of the outer world can be both in the way of natural disasters or a man-made disaster. And the world ranges us with the both natural and man-made disasters. And according to Freud, while living in our life, they spoil it. It brings a disorder, suffering, or misery. So, the external or the internal sufferings can bring our life into a misery, it can ruin our state of mind, it can lead to mental disorders. Now, if we talk about the understanding of personality, as per Sigmund Freud, he had talked about the topographical aspects of mind. Topography is about the shape, the structure. And when we talk about the topographical aspects, we had talked about the iceberg model. And Freud had divided personality structure into three complex systems, which he had called the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, these three structures are, having their own functionings. The id, which is occupying the maximum proportion of the structure of personality, is focusing majorly on the pleasure principle, whether it is the death instinct or the life instinct. And, uh, you know, then comes the ego. It functions on the reality principle. So, it is the ego which is balancing between the id's pleasure principle and the superego's morality principle. But when we talk about id, we also need to pay attention to another concept called the libido. Libido is the psychic energy which helps us in seeking the satisfaction. Libidinal energy is inclined more towards the sexual behavior, and it is directed towards the ego as well. And the most basic level of personality structure with which we are born is the id. So I have been explaining all about id till now. And like I have already explained about it having further two components, the eros and the thanatos. Next comes the ego, which is the reality principle. It functions on the reality principle, But it also has another pivotal role, and that is that the ego balances between the id, which is functioning on the pleasure principle, and the superego, which is functioning on the morality principle. The ego is the moderator between these two, and located between these two extreme forces, the ego is an expert in negotiating between the id and the superego. So, ego believes in taking a midway. It neither completely is inclined towards the id or fulfilling the instincts of the id, nor is it fully inclined towards superego. It's not always considering the morality part of our behavior. It seeks in taking a midway to satisfy both the urges and the instincts of the id and the morality of the superego, so that our behavior doesn't look too antisocial, or it's too difficult to even show a pro-social behavior which is expected by id. So then comes the superego. And superego is comprising of all the societal moral values. That is why it is considered that the superego is working on the basis of morality principle. Unlike the id, which is operating totally upon the desires, the urges, and the instincts, superego is completely opposite. It is working on sorting the conscience, and it challenges the ego to promote such values which are accepted within the society. So, superego will show such a behavior which is socially appreciated or accepted. The superego will be working on the morality principle, like I have already explained, and it wants to stop the id completely by putting a demand to the ego and not allowing the id to have a way out at all. So, superego is always trying to suppress the functioning of the id so that we are able to show a socially appreciable behavior. So, if we look into the dynamic aspects of mind, then the mind is divided into three levels of consciousness. One is the unconscious, second, the pre or the subconscious, and the topmost comes the conscious. So, we had first read about the structure of personality, and structure of personality was explaining the three structures on the basis of the iceberg model. But apart from the structure, there are three other parts which are the three levels of consciousness. According to the introspectionists, psychology concerned itself with the conscious processes, which are the operations seen by experiencing person provided in his revelation. All those events which seem to belong to psychology, like dreams, amnesia, hypnosis, etc., were not included in psychology of consciousness. But it was rather arbitrary to disregard the great appearance and sensational mental phenomenon of dreams, so inspiring poets and prophets of ancient times. So, the first part of understanding the levels of consciousness is the unconscious mind. All our past experiences, our childhood memories, our previous events, they all are saved in the unconscious mind of ours. So the main problem is that the deep and even pre-verbal aspects of unconscious mind are almost impossible to look into. So even if we will try to tap into the unconscious, we will not be able to recall anything relevant out of it. So Freud had, in fact, did something much more indirect. For he restructured the unconscious by means of his analysis of the observable phenomena of dreams. So to understand and to tap into the unconscious, Freud had also looked into the projective techniques to understand the behavior and the personality. He had looked into the dream analysis, the free association, draw a person test, and thematic analysis. All these were, a part of looking into the unconscious. After the unconscious comes the pre-conscious or the subconscious mind. And the pre-conscious mind is that which is oblivious at a given minute, but can effectively become cognizant and be accessible to us when required. So, suppose if we think that what did we have for the breakfast in the morning, or what did we have for the dinner previous night, they cannot be immediately recalled. But if we give ourselves few seconds, then certainly based on our effort, we can successfully recall what we had. And if this is recalled by making some effort, that is because something had gone into the pre-conscious, which was brought to the conscious by trying to recall it. So data that is cognizant means which can be recovered, which can be recalled, is as it were quickly cognizant and can pass into the pre-consciousness. On the other hand, pre-conscious mental forms can get to be cognizant without any activity on our own. So the conscious mind comprises of all the thoughts, emotions, and memories which we are aware of at any point of time. It is the aspect of our mental processing. So our current, our present, all is about our conscious mind. Then comes the psychosexual stages of development. We begin not just with the oral, but the neonatal stage. And at this stage, gratification of infant's needs is immediate. And the infant does not perceive the self and the objects, and he lacks an understanding of impulse from the outside world. There is no separation between wish and reality. He just wants an immediate gratification of needs without considering what is going in the environment. Following the feeding or defecation session, he may feel as omnipotent when his wish is gratified as he felt miserable when the tension is owing. The earliest emergence of the neonate's attitude to the outer world might be characterized as objectless desire to something or unconscious yearning for reunion. So, the first pleasure giving object the infant encounters are the mother's breast or breast eye or the bottle. The first somatic zone is that place which helps in the immediate gratification of the need. Now, if we look into the psychosexual stages of development, there are various erogenous zones depending upon which psychosexual stage the person is in. For example, in neonatal and oral stage, the mouth is the erogenous zone, whereas in the genital stage, it is the
मैम
sexual organs. Yes.
मैम आप रिकॉर्डिंग रिकॉर्डिंग स्टार्ट कर दीजिए मैम.
Recording start here, sir.
नहीं मैम, रिकॉर्डिंग स्टार्ट नहीं है इसमें ना।
सर मुझे तो नहीं आता, मैं सिर्फ सेशन ज्वाइन किया था।
ठीक है मैम, मैं करता हूँ।
जी जी, मैं तो
दोबारा
बहुत
से।
देर से पढ़ा रही थी।
मैम आप माइक एंड स्क्रीन शेयर दोबारा कर लीजिए।
Okay, so now if we are talking about the erogenous zones, uh, different psychosexual stages have different body parts as their respective erogenous zones, which help in the gratification of the need, which is very, very specific to the psychosexual stage that we are in. Like the anal and the bowel area will be the erogenous zone of the anal stage, the anus, the bowel area, or the mouth will be the erogenous zone of the oral stage. The genitals or the sexual organs would be, the erogenous zone of the genital stage. So infant takes in the oral stage, for the gratification to the oral area or the mouth related area, the infant is trying to always occupy his mouth, be it drinking, eating, thumb sucking, but he's always keeping his mouth busy if you see. And whatever the infant likes, he takes it into the mouth. He won't even bother to understand what he's taking into the mouth. Why? Because it is considered that the infant is understanding the world through mouth as his erogenous zone. The future of everyone is shaped by the instinctual drives, the natural stages of biological life, or the environments they grow up in. So Freud says the infant's first sexual excitations coincide with feeding period, and in this state of the sleep that fully satisfies the condition at breast, the child wears a look of bliss. So once the gratification is achieved, the infant looks very, very satisfied, that he has, as if he has achieved everything of the world. And then the second stage, which is from 1 to 3 years, 0 to 2 years is the anal stage, and from 2 years onwards or 1 to 3 years is the anal stage. First is the oral, and right after the birth, it is the neonatal stage. So anal stage is the third stage, considering neonatal to be the first. And in the anal stage, the bowel or the bladder control becomes a source of gratification discovered by the child during the second and third years of life. Now, in this stage, the child is emphasized to get toilet trained. His pleasure is in playing with the, whatever he's defecating, his his anal area, his bladder area, and that gives him the pleasure, the satisfaction. So this does lead to a conflict between parent and the child. The parent is emphasizing the child to get toilet trained, to you know keep his hygiene levels related to the anal area to the mark, whereas the child gets pleasure in eliminating and defecating. And the idea in these stages are based on the historical framework of bowel training, which we call as toilet training in today's language. And if there is any fixation, sorry to miss that, fixation of each stage really hinders with the overall personality development. So if a child is not getting enough gratification in the oral stage, it can lead to fixation. and fixation or even regression. So, suppose if the child grows to be a fully functioning adult, but somewhere he was not satisfied with his oral stage. So, he may start with thumb sucking after becoming a fully grown adult, or he may start binging or binge eating or binge drinking because he wants to keep his mouth busy. And same, with the fixation in anal stage. If at the anal stage the child is not able to, you know, control his bowels, it can lead to bedwetting. It can lead to uh, not getting toilet trained. And if there is, a regression in the anal stage, even that can lead to bedwetting. Or if the parent is very very strict with the child during the anal stage, very particular about the cleanliness when the child is getting toilet trained, then out of anxiety, out of the stress, the child might even start being very very particular, very very organized about his surroundings, his belongings, which can also imitate the symptoms of OCD when the child grows up. But if the parent is very liberal with the child in the anal stage, it can lead the child to become very impulsive, reckless, inclined to being dirty during adulthood, being disorganized. And then comes the phallic stage, which is between 4 to 6 or 3 to 6 years of age. So for a child, his attention from 3 to 5 years falls on the genital area, even on the parents' genitalia. And additionally, the child has sexual attraction to the parent of the opposite gender. So the identification consists in positive sexual attitudes of the boy to the mother. So the boy will be very, very protective, very possessive, very much attracted towards his mother. And same will happen with the girl child. If the girl will be very possessive and protective about her father. And at the same time, you know the child is attracted towards the opposite gender parent and is very very repelled by the same gender parent, and he or she may consider the same gender parent as an interference between himself and the opposite gender parent. And in this phallic stage, the Oedipus and the Electra complex are considered. And the fear of the father results in the anxiety, conversion, and the desire of the mother. The boy actually wants to imitate and play the role of the father, imitating to be the head of the family, imitating to be the bread earner. And the boy wants to flood his father with his such awesome retaliation that the latter would become the father's surrogate. But the power of awesome retaliation and that the latter possesses deters the boy from doing so. So it's just about that, the father is not liked by the son during this phallic stage because the son wants to feel empowered and authoritative and a substitute of his father towards the mother. But it's eventually that, as children grow, they are able to understand that just because, uh, that they cannot substitute the same gender parent with themselves as far as the both the sets of parents is concerned. The boy cannot substitute his father for his mother, or the girl cannot substitute her mother for her father. So women's psychology had been explained by much derided so-called penis and why. And even the womb, like later Karen Horney had also talked about the womb and why. Then comes the latency stage, that is from 6 years till puberty. Now, in the latency stage, the child has, deeply suppressed his sexual interest, and this is rather manifested, through the social enhancement of the social behavior of the children towards the same gender friends. So the girls will be very much comfortable and very friendly with other girl other girls as their friends. Same applies to boys. Boys will be more comfortable towards other boys as their friends as compared to girls. And you will see this majorly happening in the school age, when girls will be playing together and boys all will also be playing together. Girls will prefer to sit with girls, boys will prefer to sit with boys. And the sexual interest is deeply suppressed in this stage, and the children are more focused on getting physically developed. They are more focused on in their academics and their sports performances. But this stage doesn't last for long. At the end comes the final psychosexual stage called the genital stage, where, the genital stage begins when we have hit puberty and it goes lifelong. And it's also the genital stage that people experience between the ages of adolescence till adulthood. And the genitals at this age take on the function of sexual energy. It is, during puberty when the genitals or the sexual organs they start maturing, and the lot of hormonal changes happen, which they impact the behavior of ours towards the opposite gender. At the genital stage, the main function is supposed to carry out the offspring. So the main purpose of genital stage is procreation and survival of us as species. So the libidinal energy is channelized not towards the opposite gender parent, but towards our own age opposite gender people. So during the pubertal development, the glands develop from this stage, and the genitalia becomes the principal erogenous zone, and the desire of the ungenital heterosex matures. And in the latency stage, okay, this is just the summary of all the psychosexual stages, and I've already explained what is erogenous zones. Erogenous zones are those parts of our body which help us seek all the pleasure, considering in which psychosexual stage we are. So the erogenous zones keep changing as per the psychosexual stage that we are in. And Freud argues that erogenous zones have an important functioning considering the formation of personality. Okay, so we have till now done the structure of personality, the levels of consciousness, and even the psychosexual stages of development. Then we look into the ego defense mechanisms, which is also a whole lot of chunk in, if you are writing long answers in psychoanalysis. And please remember, I have also said this in the class, that whenever you are writing a long answer type question on psychoanalysis or Freudian approach, please write about the neo Freudian approach as well. Psychoanalysis comprises of both the Freudian perspective as well as the neo Freudians. So, according to Freud, the ego avails itself of admirable techniques in handling threat and anxiety. In particular, the ego may disguise, distort, falsify, deny, and misinterpret reality to reclaim the human psyche. There are some ego defense mechanisms which we unknowingly use, which are listed below. So, actually, if we understand, we are not going out of the way or making any effort to show to use the ego defense mechanisms. They are happening unconsciously without our even being aware that why we are doing them. So the first ego defense mechanism is repression. Repression is actually the basic foundation on which entire practice of psychoanalysis was built. It is the most important feature of psychoanalysis. Repression acts as a defense mechanism against the operation of irrational, unconscious motives, whereby the mind banishes from an individual's unconscious awareness any thought, memory, or perception perceived as being detrimental or otherwise capable of triggering anxiety. So, according to Freud, repression is involving, uh, you know, something which is available to the superego that is being pressed, beneath deeply, which we are unable to recall. So, the primary repression is the class of ideas characterized by the fact that the thoughts which are incompatible with the ego and therefore painful and unthinkable are prevented from entering the conscious. Something which we don't want to think about, something that is very, very stressful, very, very disturbing, we push it deep into our unconscious. It's pressed deep into the unconscious in such a way that we are not able to recall. That is the repression. Then comes denial. So, denial is not accepting the fact of the life. And in a denial, a person rejects the reality or the fact by excluding the information from consciousness. Suppose if a near or dear one passes away, the person is not able to accept that someone whom he really liked, whom he was attached to or very, very close to, has passed away, is no more in the world. He is not able to accept the fact. He may keep saying that no, he will come back. No, he cannot leave me. No, it's not possible. So that is denial. So, or if someone is diagnosed with a serious, deadly disease like cancer or HIV or any other which is very, very dangerous, and the person is not going to survive for long, he may deny that no, I cannot be having cancer, I cannot be suffering from cancer, I cannot be suffering from HIV/AIDS. So, when a situation is unbearable or overwhelming, the person might end up rejecting to accept or recognize the situation or simply refuses to accept the situation. So, the best way he feels to, overcome this stress is to refuse that the situation is even happening around, that someone has passed away. He just prefers to refuse than to accept, because acceptance will lead to a lot of stress. Then comes your reaction formation. So it appears that Freud discussed the cases when drive might turn into its opposite, since mental life has its dual aspects and thus reversal is always option. So reaction formation. If I say that I failed in the exam because I did not use this lucky red pen of mine. So that is about the reaction formation. So, endearment may become hostility or joy to sorrow, or, suppose if I am very, very happy inside, but I'm showing a lot of frustration outside. That could also be a case of reaction formation. And in reaction formation, we encounter a defense by which the ego eliminates from knowledge an anxiety producing impulse, a species of activity opposed to the impulse, and systematically over exaggerating it in itself. So, if a child is extremely angry, if a person is extremely angry towards a child, he literally wants to attack the child. He, instead of attacking the child, will rather show more of love, more of affection, and not actually the anger or violence or hostility towards the child. गुस्सा तो अंदर बहुत आएगा, लेकिन वो गुस्सा नहीं दिखाएगा, वो फिर भी बहुत प्यार से पेश आएगा. So, next ego defense mechanism is projection. Projection is when, we are projecting or blaming someone with those negative attributes or traits that we actually must be having. So, for example, those who are warriors or members may be rejected by others and may tell the rejecting party that they are aggressors. So, someone who is a warrior maybe some other person may be saying he's not a warrior, he is very very aggressive, because the person who is blaming him as aggressive cannot be a warrior himself, so he has made the warrior also a very aggressive person. The ego is safe because through projection it gets the rid of the motives and ideas that cause anxiety. So any ego defense mechanism is applied for avoiding any scope of anxiety, and it is not a perfect way of refusing the cause of the anxiety. It's just for surviving. Then comes rationalization. Rationalization means being able to reason out. It is an attempt to describe behaviors for which a person is not proud as having some legitimate or acceptable cause of being less than optimal. In the ego defense mechanism, people give plausible causes in order to justify certain feelings that are unreasonable and reprehensible. So it covers cognitive distortions to make an event impulse threatening. So, like I say, for rationalization, that I did not fail in the exam, or I failed in the exam not because I studied less, but because the question paper was very tough. So I don't blame myself. I just try to reason out that my reason of failing is not my being irresponsible, but rather the question paper coming to be very tough. Or maybe the marking was done in a very strict way. That's why I failed. Had the evaluator been a little liberal, I would have definitely got better marks. I would have fared better. Then comes your sublimation. So sublimation is when the ego takes a thought or desire that society wouldn't accept and changes it into something more acceptable or even useful. So these or any other activities, including work, sport, art, or philanthropy, may include a conversion of sexual energy into socially approved avenues. So instead of responding to an intolerable desire to touch other individuals, they may physically join teams and games to conquer a triumph. So sublimation will be like channelizing your sexual urge into a more socially acceptable way. And by using sublimation, our negative impulses, our negative urges are worked into not only such behaviors which cause less harm than such impulses, but also that are productive. So, if we are showing sublimation, our negative energies are channelized into the positive ones, and we become more productive through channelizing our negative sexual energies. Then comes displacement. So displacement means like throwing someone else's emotion on someone else. So if a child is very very angry with his parent, he may show the anger on the younger sibling. That is displacement. कहीं की बात कहीं पे होना. So displacement involves the changing of aggressive impulses from someone who is self-significant to someone who is less self-significant. So you know that you cannot shout at the boss, and you are very very angry or frustrated with the decision made by the boss, so you might show your anger maybe on your colleague who's sharing your room with you, or someone like your sibling. So throwing someone else's anger on someone who is less powerful than you, your younger sibling, your servant would be less powerful than you as compared to the boss in the domain of power. You cannot take revenge from someone who is powerful, so you'll take revenge and throw anger on someone who is less powerful than you. Then comes regression. Regression means going to the previous stages, previous psychosexual stages. So, suppose if I say a person, because of immense stress levels, has started thumb sucking or has started bedwetting. So, thumb sucking, bedwetting, they all are related to your previous psychosexual stages like oral stage or anal stage. So, temporary withdrawal may be portrayed as a brief fallings back to an earlier developmental phase like oral stage, anal stage. And it could also include temper tantrums, that you want to seek someone's love, you want to seek someone's attention, so you start throwing temper tantrums for your survival, or giving oneself over to authority, that you're completely surrendering yourself as a small child to the authority, or trying to seek attention and acting like a baby. That is also a part of regression. Then comes intellectualization as another ego defense mechanism. In this, the people use logic to prevent themselves from engaging in or experiencing uncomfortable anxiety, including inducing or distressing experience. If the energy is directed towards a logical analysis of the situation, and then the person can dissociate with the belief that which may question his identity. So suppose if one person is rude towards the other person, then the person who is receiving the rude behavior, who is witnessing the rude behavior, will try to think that, okay, this person who is rude to me, it's not because he's angry with me. It may be because he's in a bad mood, or he is a very very ill-mannered person, or he's under tremendous stress that he is venting out his rude behavior on me. So, trying to reason out the problem is about the intellectualization. And with the help of intellectualization, people learn to devalue their own feelings. And instead of feelings, it becomes possible to regard the difficult situation as a problem that needs to be solved. And thus, the person does not continue to deal with his difficult feelings. But okay, these were the domains of the psychoanalysis, but definitely there are critics. It has been criticized a lot. First is that Freud's analysis is usually laid on simple observations. It is very very primitive now, and it doesn't reason the human behavior very scientifically, and it is quite generalized. And we have to be careful with the statements that Freud had used. Then comes that psychoanalysis does not provide hypotheses amendable to experimental testing, which is why there have been experimental studies conducted to his predictions by his followers. So, the psychoanalysis doesn't involve any scientific domain of understanding human behavior. It is all very, very hypothetical and like a story like situation. It doesn't have any scientific reason for its existence. Then comes the closedness. So, Freud's followers and associates were required to be disciples committed to maintaining this theory formulated by him. So, there was no reason of making such, abstract theory, and it was not relatable to everyday actual human behavior that we see. And this made the disciples of Freud, or the neo-Freudians, distance themselves from Freud, because they were not very satisfied with his perspectives. And finally, the fourth demerit is that Freud had emphasized a lot on men. He never emphasized on women, that whatever libidinal or sexual energy, sexual urges were there, that were more inclined towards men. He never considered that women too are existing, and they too have feelings, they too have urges, and their sufferings should also be considered. Then comes that, Freud's overall theory is, in some or the other way, inclined towards a sexual behavior which is not actually happening. There are, if most of the times our behavior needs to be, socially conforming instead of being sexually conforming. Our behavior cannot always be sexually inclined in every scenario, at every place, and in everyday life. Our behavior needs to even see the social aspects which Freud had not paid attention to. Then comes the perspectives of neo-Freudians, and the first neo-Freudian was Alfred Adler, and he had talked about the individual psychology. And according to Alfred Adler, certain specific early childhood attitudes determine all the further attitudes. So, whatever attitudes we form during our childhood because of our experience, they start, getting sustained lifelong, even for the future. And a fact is that Orla wasn't acknowledging the theory of mind topography by Freud. So, as per Adler, whatever Freud had talked about the structure of consciousness, the levels of consciousness, the structure of personality, this topography actually was very, very abstract and it could not be related to everyday life and the real world. Then Orler admitted, however, that most of such a man's critical attitude can be traced to early childhood and the nursery, a period of all the father future demeanor, and Adler was against Freud's theory for the formative phases, and he was against all the goodwill of Oedipal complex. So Adler was absolutely against the Oedipal complex, the Electra complex, and that we uh, that the child is getting attracted or averse by one of the parents. All this is very, very unreasonable as per Alfred Adler, and Adler was convinced that men are controlled by creativity and not a sexual urge. Sexual urges are there for life instinct, but they don't keep hovering over a human behavior. And it was a human origin force and not in any way linked to the characteristics of individuals' biology. So, Adler, like all understanding psychologists, mentioned that every individual was unique, referring to the division of sciences into the natural and culture science as proposed. Adler believed that every person is unique in how they think, feel, speak, and act, even if two people seem to do the same thing. So, Adler had appreciated the individual differences and the subjectivity as far as human behavior is concerned. And according to him, each of us has creative ability that helps us shape what we are. Adler supposed that there was such a component in the male character as self-assertion, and we can describe it from the first day, from the first cry, and the stand of the child towards the environment, which can be in a very in any way characterized by but as hostile. So, Orla's theory of aggressiveness was discussed in connection with work of organ inferiority. So, when Freud had talked about, uh, Freud had talked about that penis envy, that, women don't have penis, so there is a penis envy among women, which, was discouraged by the neo-Freudians, especially Karen Horney. And the first question that arose out of the discussion of such controversial topics was penis envy in women. That if women don't have this organ, then how can they have this penis envy? So he did not reject the concept of pleasure, but he rejected that pleasure is the main goal of human life. So human life is not just meant for fulfilling all the pleasures, but in human life there are other purposes to be fulfilled. There are other achievements to be other goals to be achieved, other agendas, other aims also that need to be achieved. And Adler had also, talked about the social interest, social feeling of a person, which is an evaluative attitude towards life. So, social interest accompanies empathy, identification of other person, and awareness of them turning into friends, sympathizers, or lovers. And understanding, as per Adler, is to perceive the other person and to look at things with the eyes of that person. So Adler had also emphasized on the sensitivity and empathy. So as per Adler, every individual possesses social interest and sociability as an inborn capacity. So we are all, not just capable of surviving through instincts and sexual urges, but we also are capable of showing social capability, and we all are, born to be capable of doing something, big in our life and to achieve goals in our life. And Orla believed that a person's first and natural feeling about other people is other people and not just about himself. So, in Freud's perspective, the self ideal could be referred to as the ego ideal and further developed as superego. So, superego, and like yesterday in the class, also someone had asked about, uh, you know, s- ideal self and self ideal and ego ideal. See, ego ideal is about the superego, that following the morality, that is the ego ideal, which Freud called as super ego, and Adler had discussed this as ego ideal. And it as per Adler, ego ideal, which is a super ego, which Freud said was a significant part of our personality, because it discusses the morality and the moral context of our behavior, and not just the the pleasure principle of our behavior. So, self ideal of Adler shows that striving towards a goal, character traits, and complexes are further developed. Then Adler had explained the four temperaments of Hippocrates, and the four temperaments were sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. So, this you had already studied in the type approach of personality. And then comes the what social interest that Orler had talked about. And first is the first type shows a lot of efforts in achieving his goal. So actually these four traits were the similar ones to what Hippocrates had talked about, and these four traits are of different types of personalities. And the first trait shows a person who is very much goal oriented and does not follow social norms to achieve the goals. He is very, very self centered, and he behaves with a very antisocial behavior. The second type of personality that Orler had talked about is the getting type. And he does not take any action and does not have any social interaction. So, whatever he gets, he is at the receiving end of whatever time and destiny are giving him. And he would not strive and struggle to achieve something out of the box. Then comes the third type, which can be the avoiding one. So whatever may happen, he just tries to avoid from all the struggles, from all the responsibilities, and he remains very, very uncertain. His plan of action is very uncertain because he's anyways just inclined to avoid. And the fourth type that Orler had talked about is being socially useful type, one who is very, very pro-social, who strives to show an altruistic or a pro-social behavior, and is always working for the welfare of people and doing everything necessary for the well-being of people around him. And then comes another neo-Freudian called Karen Horney, and she had majorly talked about womb envy. So just the way Freud had talked about penis envy, that since women don't have this organ, so they are very jealous of not having it. This is one such organ which is different based on the genders. So same way Horney had creatively thought of men having womb envy, that fine men, and if women have penis envy as per Freud, then even men can have womb envy because they are not capable of giving birth. They don't have that organ only which can which can help in giving birth. So Horney aligns that any envy is socially grounded because a person has more noteworthy benefits. So actually Horney also said that these envy are there, but in both the genders there are merits and demerits. If one thing is there, the other thing is not there. So she said that men have womb envy because they cannot allow the birth. And according to Horney, there are three styles of managing uneasiness, like the stress. So the first style is mobilization, to go towards people, which include affiliation and dependence motivation. So if you're very much stressed, if you want any conformity, approach such people who can help you in conforming what you expect, who will conform with you, who will say, yes, you are right, who will support you invariably, who will accept you for whatever you are. And such children, they find themselves relying on the caregivers, such as parents, to get an attention and affection through which they are free from anxiety. So, it's a way of stress coping, getting love, conformity, attention. They help you in coping from you not getting approved, or you not being considered right, or you not being accepted. The second tendency is raising voices and being inappropriate and intrusive to other people. When you start becoming over interfering, you become over indulgent in someone else's functioning. And that can lead to proper fight over any unhappy family circumstances and cope with the anxiety. The third type of management is anti people, and the main goal of this strategy are separation and distancing. You start becoming anti-social, you start becoming anti people, you start harming them. And such children who are affected can become anxious just because they are the victim of an anti people personality. They can become very very anxious because they do not feel accepted for whatever they are, and they want to be lonely and learn and earn for themselves. They finally admit that they are not accepted by anyone, and they start feeling lonely. They start feeling unwanted, and they start struggling for their own selves. And such children grow up and tend to avoid experiences like love and friendship because they were not accepted in the childhood, so they don't even feel that they should now be giving an opportunity to someone to accept them. वो किसी को मौका ही नहीं देते कि वो कोई उनको एक्सेप्ट कर ले, क्योंकि उनका जो चाइल्डहुड था वो बहुत ज्यादा बिटर था. They never felt wanted, they never felt accepted when they themselves were children. And this finishes the chapter. So the last chapter is on third force psychology, which is also called the humanistic approach to understand psychology. And once I finish this fourth chapter, I will be showing you the previous year question paper, and we can discuss the answers of the question paper, and you too can come up with your queries. So third force psychology is called third force because it responded to the limitation of both behaviorism and psychoanalysis. So, first was behaviorism, then came psychoanalysis, and then came the humanistic approach. And in humanistic approach, major contributors were of Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, who stressed on individual as a potential for growth, self-actualization, and personal choice. So we as humans, as individuals, are capable of growing, of self-actualizing, and making our personal choice for living our own life. And it aimed at understanding our point of view, like people's point of view, their values, their concepts like self-esteem and personal fulfillment. So, Carl Rogers was a pioneer figure in the humanistic psychology, and he gave an extremely deep depiction of human behavior and personality from his theory of self. So, if we remember in the PCP classes, we had talked about the ideal self and the real self, and that was propounded by Carl Rogers. The concept of self comes to the center of this journey of self actualization, as it is an important tool to protect one's identity and design the paths of a lifetime. So, if we talk about the concept of self, the real self and the ideal self, real self is something that we actually currently are. It constitutes that current and the actual recent part of ourselves. And the real self is the true understanding of ourself, and it comprises of the characteristics, the traits, and the abilities the person believes he has. At our most basic core, it is our experience. Our experience forms our real self. The content from which our experience has been made and the realization of our potential. On the other hand, the ideal self is the person we actually want to be. We look forward to becoming what we look forward to becoming is the ideal self. मैं आज ये हूं, मैं अब ये बनना चाहती हूं, जो चाहते हैं वो बनना, that is the ideal, that is considered the best version, the most flawless version of self. So a person who embodies our goals, values, aspirations is always aspired to be partly under the influence of the expectations of some special subjects, namely childhood. So Rogers acknowledges the psychological well-being depends upon the distance between the real and the ideal self. अब क्या होता है, जितना ज्यादा gap, like you are seeing in the diagram, this circle is ideal and this is real. इनमें काफी gap है. They are not, you know, getting mixed with each other. They are not synchronizing. So more the gap between the real and ideal self, more will be the mismatch. And more the mismatch, more will be the frustration and anxiety. The person will be very, very dissatisfied, unhappy, frustrated of his life. क्योंकि जो वो बनना चाहता है वो बन नहीं पा रहा है. And that blockage of becoming what he wants to become, that blockage is leading to the suffering and anxiety and frustration. But if the gap between the real and the ideal self is very less, they both have synchronized very well with each other, then the person feels very, very satisfied and happy in his life. He feels that he has achieved whatever he aimed to, and that leads to satisfaction in his life. Then Rogers also gave the concept of condition versus unconditional positive regard. So, positive regard is a very important part of Rogers' theory, as it is the warmth, affection, love, and respect that individuals receive from their significant others. If we feel that, people are giving us love, warmth, respect, all the positive emotions, positive behavior, even we feel wanted, we feel very, very secure, our self-esteem also improves. So Rogers stressed the need for an environment where all people can look for and realize their potentials in absence of any condition or strings attached, which is unconditional positive regard, affection, respect. So what happens in unconditional positive regard? You are getting love, respect, warmth, and all positive feelings, all positive emotions from someone without any apprehensions, without any strings attached, means without any conditions put कि तुम्हारे तरफ मैं तब अच्छा बनूंगा जब तुम मेरे लिए काम करोगे. That is a condition. Give and take is a condition. But in unconditional positive regard, you are given love, respect, and all other positive emotions, irrespective of whatever you are. And that is what is important for psychotherapy as well. Suppose if you have vented out in front of the therapist, you shouted, you cried, you showed your frustration, but the therapist doesn't shout back at you. The therapist doesn't scold you. The therapist doesn't get vindictive. That is the unconditional positive regard. Whatever behavior you had shown towards a therapist is accepted by the therapist with complete grace. That fine, it happens. I accept your frustration. I accept for whatever behavior you have shown. That is the unconditional positive regard. If it would have been a conditional positive regard, then I'm sure it would have led to vengeance. That, okay, you shouted at me, I shout back at you. That is not unconditional positive regard then. So unfortunately, a lot of people live with conditional positive regard. which means love and acceptance are based on following certain requirements. You have to fulfill certain conditions if you want love and respect. You are not given love and respect unconditionally without any prior, need fulfillments. So, uh, unfortunately, a lot of people live with conditional positive regard, which means love and acceptance are based on following certain requirements or acting in certain ways. Only if you will act in a certain way, behave in a favorable way, that you will get love. No, that is not unconditional. If conditions are put, terms and conditions are applied, then nothing is left to be unconditional love. So a child may form self-concept centered around what someone expects and not on actual potential. That okay, you will be, having a positive self-concept only if you follow what we tell you to do. What if you follow what you are told to follow. आप वो करो जो हाँ वो कह रहे हो कहते हैं, and then you have a high self concept. No, that is not conditional. That is very much conditional, and you are tamed to follow it. So the conditional acceptance can stifle self exploration and can result in internal conflicts because the individual tries to reconcile their real self with the challenges that they impose on themselves. Then comes the fully functioning person. So Carl Rogers had also talked about a fully functioning person, and such people are, having they are very well synchronized with what they feel. They know what they feel. They have the ability, and they are having the intuitions as well as with the truth hidden in their real self. So a fully functioning person is always aware of his capabilities, of his interests, his abilities, his potential, and the conditions of worth become free. They are not based on self-worth on external validations that okay, if I'm appreciated, I will be considering myself to be good. No, they don't want external validation. They know what they are, who they are, and how they are. That external validation doesn't mean that you are a fully functioning person. It means you are still dependent on someone and you want someone's approval, a standardized way of someone else to make you a good person. You are, trying to be good as per their standards and you are not aware of yourself. आपको अपने बारे में अभी भी नहीं पता है. That is not a fully functioning person then. So, in this process of becoming self, they are spontaneous, authentic, and open to new and challenging experiences. So, people who are fully functioning, they are open to experiences. They are able to take up new challenges, whatever come up in front of them. And our self concept changes in proportion to our experiences and just how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. So, first comes embracing the experience. A fully functioning person would accept all of their experiences, be it positive or negative, as they are. It's if a person is fully functioning, then it doesn't mean that he will only be accepting the positive experiences and deny the negative experiences or run away from the negative experiences. He will be at the receiving end of both. So they don't fear to express their emotions or thoughts and welcome such as they are essential to their personal growth. And if a person is accepting both the positive and the negative experiences, it allows him to meet uh, the life's challenges, and he's always, curious to explore new avenues of life. Then these people take very much from the moment and base their decisions out of what is going on the moment. So what happens, a person who is a fully functioning person, a fully functioning person will be making decisions based on their at the moment experience. They will not show the judgment of their past experiences. Their current decisions will not be influenced based on their previous experiences. A fully functioning person will be deciding at the spur of the moment and not based on what the past has been. They have a lot of self trust. They trust their abilities, they trust their complete selves, and they are capable of navigating their lives based on the good feelings and the directed ideas that we have in our heads. And then comes creativity and flexibility. They are very, very creative, they are flexible in thinking, and they like to have flexibility in their life. They are not rigid. That, had they been rigid, they wouldn't have been open to new experiences. So they don't have a lot of rigidity, and they take life as it comes, and they have a sense of freedom. Individuals have a feeling of freedom while taking decisions and are accountable for them. So whatever they decide, they take the onus of whatever their decisions are, and they are responsible, they are constructive, they are committed to exhibit and prove themselves, prove their competence. They participate in all the meaningful events of life, and they share the experiences of the fair relationships. And the best part is that they're open to feedback. They accept their limitations and their merits, their strengths, both. It's not that they are biased about the limitations or their weaknesses. They, gracefully acknowledge their limitations and their strengths. And Rogers claimed that all the humans have an inherent need to receive a positive regard from others. So, fine, it's good to be critical, but all the time being unconditionally criticized out of nothing, even that is not reasonable. Every person wants to be praised. Every person wants to feel accepted. Every person wants to feel acknowledged. And every person wants to, get someone's love, sympathy, soft corner. And it is very critical need for a healthy psychological development. So, if this sense of an unconditional positive regard helps us in building a secure self concept which is free from distortion, and that comes when love and acceptance are conditional. So, next, after Abraham Maslow, after Carl Rogers, comes about Abraham Maslow. So, Abraham Maslow had introduced a theory of hierarchical structure of five fundamental needs that drive and shape the human behavior. These needs are organized into five levels: physiological, safety, love, and belonging, and self esteem, and then self actualization. So, the physiological and safety and love, they are considered the lower level needs, whereas the esteem and the self actualization are considered the higher level needs. So Maslow viewed these needs as innate, means no one has taught us to, grow up and be, to grow up with these needs or to have these needs. They are inborn. They are innate, means inborn within us. And these needs are present from birth. How we fulfill them depends upon the learned behaviors, which can vary from person to person. So the hierarchy of Maslow's need hierarchy starts with the lower level or the physiological needs, and the top most level is the higher level or the self-actualization need. And most of the time, we have only one level of need which we give our attention at the time according to what was already satisfied. So we are able to cater to mostly one need at a time. And there are certain characteristics of Maslow's needs hierarchy, and the lower level of the hierarchy of needs are more immediate and more vital for existence. So suppose if we are not able to fulfill our the need for food, water, home, safety, survival, then we'll not be able to survive for long and reach our top notch self actualization need. Then comes the developmental timing. Basic needs like physiological and safety needs are very, very prominent during the infancy period. It's once we survive, then only we can start having a more advanced level of needs. Then comes the crisis and deficiency. Gratification of higher needs will not cause a crisis when gratified later than lower needs. So it doesn't mean that, if we are having a higher level of needs, our lower level of needs are not to be catered. Even if, a person is a celebrity, he also needs safety, he also needs food, he also needs his survival. It's not that a person has become a VIP, so his basic level needs are not to be fulfilled. He will ultimately remain like any other human. So essentially, essentiality of higher transcendental needs for immediate survival. So although not immediately necessary for survival, fulfilling these higher needs does not grow and fulfill a person's immediate needs. Yes, we that is why we have both lower and higher level needs. We for us, higher level needs enhance our competence, enhance our self-esteem, make us feel important, but along with them, the lower level needs also go parallelly, because until our basic needs are fulfilled, we will not be able to reach our higher level of needs. So, higher needs are to satisfy the external conditions and are more often favorable than those needed for satisfying the lower needs. Moreover, it's not necessary that, one need is completely supposed to be satisfied and then only the other need will be met. So though we call it a needs hierarchy, there are 5 stages, but it doesn't mean that every needs to be completed or fulfilled stage wise. So if this is a self actualization need, which is a topmost need, it doesn't mean that, the physiological needs are fulfilled permanently. They also keep happening. And also, it doesn't mean that, if self actualization needs are in the process of being fulfilled, so physiological needs, once fulfilled, are done forever. They also will keep happening. So lower level needs go parallelly along with higher level needs. एस्टीम नीड्स के साथ भी हमें सेफ्टी नीड्स चाहिए, लव के नीड्स चाहिए, बिलोंगिंग के नीड्स चाहिए. ये नहीं कि एस्टीम नीड्स तक हम पहुंच गए तो बाकी नीड्स की कोई नीड नहीं है. So physiological needs are like, fulfilling our basic needs like hunger, thirst, sexual drives, sleep, breathing, health, everything that can help for us to survive. Those are the physiological needs. जिन भी चीजों से हम सरवाइव कर सकते हैं, हम जिंदा रह सकते हैं, वो हमारे फिजियोलॉजिकल नीड्स कहे जाते हैं. देन कम्स द सेफ्टी नीड्स. अब सिर्फ जिंदा रहना काफी नहीं है. वी नीड टू कीप आवरसेल्व्स सेफ. So we end up, looking into how we can stay safe, like staying in a hut, staying in a community, staying in a house, and not staying, anywhere where, we can be made the prey animals. And their reactions, how we react to threat, so that, we can keep ourselves safe. Until we react to threat, we try to save ourselves, we will not be surviving. So safety needs are very important, along with the physiological needs, to keep ourselves safe and our lives going. Then comes belongingness and love needs. So close personal relationships are very, very important. We are social animals. We cannot stay in isolation for long. We are emotionally and socially dependent on each other. So in requirement of intimate relationships are used for fulfilling the need of love. And Maslow did not identify love with sexuality. Here, sexuality was only up to Freud. When it came to humanistic approach, it was more in a humanitarian context. Here love was about the bonding, about the cohesiveness, about the positive attitude that people hold towards each other, and not just about sexuality and the survival part. So Maslow suggests that lack of satisfying the need for love in one's life can cause emotional distress and maladjustment. So self-esteem is about being confident and awesome and feeling good about yourself, which in turn gives us the self-worth and competence. So once we feel positive about ourselves, once we give importance to our own selves, that can enhance our esteem needs. And meeting these needs will fulfill our self satisfaction and will boost our confidence and productivity to the extent that we are getting more effective in whatever we are doing. Then comes your last, which is a self actualization need, and it is the highest in the Maslow's needs hierarchy. And in this, we are able to completely realize our potential and capabilities. कि हम किस चीज के काबिल हैं, हम क्या किस चीज के लायक हैं, हम कितने लायक हैं. दैट इज अबाउट द पोटेंशियल, कि हम क्या कर सकते हैं मैक्सिमम बेस्ट अपने लाइफ में, जिससे हम मैक्सिमम अचीवमेंट्स कर पाए. सो बाय डेफिनेशन दिस नीड इन्वॉल्व्स अचीविंग बोथ personal growth and fulfillment to the highest degree. According to Maslow, everyone can make it to this level regardless of whether they are in an occupation or a choice. So there is nothing original or even necessarily passive or inactive about the term self-actualization. Maslow pointed out that being able to function to the utmost potential could be in any area ranging from cooking to parenting and not just in the big fame fields like art or writing. So conditions must be met to achieve self-actualization or break free from the constraints. If you really want to achieve to the fullest potential, you have to break free from all the, artifacts or all the things which are an obstacle or a hindrance from you to grow to the optimum. Beyond the basic needs, you have to grow out of the comfort of just fulfilling your basic needs. Roti kapra makan, that is not enough. That is just up to your basic safety physiological needs. You will have to come out of your comfort zone to achieve your fullest potential, which is your self actualization. Then comes your self security. We need to be secure in ourselves with others. Given the importance of being able to both give and receive love, people with the capacity to do this are more likely to be stable and adjusted. Then exceptions are where we start sacrificing our lower needs for the higher goals. So there are some people who commit to the ideals to so passionately that they are willing to forego basic needs. Like people may fast to the point of death in service of their beliefs, that their beliefs, their achievements are higher than their satiation and their hunger being curbed. So artists and creatives, they show their dedication sometimes, which leads to neglect their basic needs. They forget that they're hungry, but they keep on working. Then comes your last portion, which is existentialism. And existentialism in psychology investigates the nature of human existence. That why are we existing? What are we existing for? What is the purpose of our existence? And this perspective intersects with the clinical practices and the broader understanding of human behavior and mental health, emphasizing individual experience and subjective reality. So the core parts of existentialism are freedom and responsibility. So existential psychology stresses on the idea that there is a freedom to choose and that the decisions made are the responsibility of the individual. A focus on personal responsibility can be effective way to bring about self-awareness and empowerment, but it can also contribute to the existential anxiety. So though we are aware of what our responsibility is, but if we are unable to fulfill all the responsibilities and the duties that we ought to, it can lead to existential anxiety. And existential anxiety means that we are getting stressed because we do not know that why we are existing. हमें नहीं पता कि हम किस लिए हैं इस दुनिया में, हमें नहीं पता कि हमारी जिंदगी का मकसद क्या है. All this leads to anxiety if we are unaware about the purpose of our existence. Then comes the absurd encompasses the conflict that is humanity searching for meaning and the seeming indifference to the meaning of universe. Authentic life, psychological well-being, and satisfaction are linked to the authenticity, while there are always conflicts between wanting to be authentic and being conflictual. Then these are all the characteristics of existentialism. Jean Paul Sartre and personal agency and creativity are encouraged through this principle. So the individuals can create the image of identity and the path of their own lives. So it means that if we are existing, we are having a complete freedom to choose uh, our own identities and to choose the purpose of our life and what should be the goals and aspirations of our life. Then Viktor Frankl had also talked about existentialism, and he said that even in the phase when people suffer, they can still find meaning and purpose. So, suffering doesn't mean that all the time people have to boggle down or people have to get crumbled under their sufferings. But even within suffering, people can look for purposeful life, look for satisfaction, look for aims, look for their new goals, new aims, which can keep them motivated. Then comes confrontation with nothingness, that existential anxiety and crisis can be caused by facing nothingness. If you feel very, very empty, you feel that there is nothing in your life, you feel that, there is a vacuum of emptiness, that leads to nothingness. And at the same time, it can stimulate us to make us, discover our purpose. So the complete opposite on of the other side of the continuum is the uh, discovering our purpose of life instead of nothingness. So instead of feeling that you are useless, your life is useless, there's no purpose of you to live, there's no purpose of your life, the other extreme is to look for a purpose, make your own life, your own happiness a purpose to live. And then comes your existentialism, and it sees what that with human existence comes the inherent anxieties. We are afraid of death, we are alone and without meaning. So if we don't have any meaning, we start having fear, we start having anxiety, and we start getting afraid of and accepting that we are not immortal, we are mortal. Then comes role of relationships in existential anxiety, in existential psychology. So existential psychology emphasizes the significance of true interpersonal relationships. It studies how one understands other people, how loneliness takes place, and whether there exists a genuine connection as a way to discover and fulfill oneself. And this existentialism can be even used in psychotherapy, which is a humanistic existential approach of giving psychotherapy. And another is the real psychotherapy, which helps us in aiming and in and its aim is to make people feel accepted and feel make people understand the purpose of their existence. Then comes the Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, which focuses on understanding the meaning of our life. That what is the purpose and what is the meaning of our life. And according to Viktor Frankl, logotherapy encourages people to find purpose in their suffering and make meaningful choices despite life's challenges. Then comes humanistic existential psychology, combination of existential and humanistic approach that tries to bring out the best of the individual and works towards the personal growth of self-actualization. So in existential humanistic psychology, the purpose is to extract the maximum potential of the individual, to extract the maximum capability of a person, and to help that person to live his life to the fullest by making him understand his potential. So, existential psychology pays a special attention to both anxiety and depression, and sometimes leading to existential crisis. So there have been contributions like, it offers framework for understanding human motivation beyond the basic needs. It has contributed to the development of therapeutic methods that address deep existential concerns. And existential psychology enriches the understanding of individual differences and personal narratives, fostering a more nuanced view of psychological well-being. It addresses the valuable perspectives on how we cope with the existential crisis, and it encourages our personal growth. So let us now see some of the previous year's questions. Okay, so this is the previous year question paper. No, this is of understanding mental disorder. Wait. This is a previous year question paper of June 2024. So please go through the questions. It is of 90 marks. Please note it down that it will be of 3 hours and it will be of 90 marks paper, which will comprise of two sections, section A and section B. Section A will have long answer type question. Each question will be for 20 marks. And section B will have short notes. Each question will be for 10 marks. So this is a question paper. Describe the characteristics of functionalism. Elucidate the William James view of consciousness. So in consciousness, in structuralism, we had talked about Titchener and William James. No, no, that is structuralism. Sorry, functionalism में William James के बारे में we have to write about the consciousness, that introspection, consciousness, these topics. Examine the major tenets of behaviorism. Compare Watson and Skinner's contribution to behaviorism. So you can even talk about their experiments, the merits and demerits about their work, and their perspectives of behaviorism. Do talk about their their experiments. That will be the base of your answer. The major tenets of behaviorism may, you have to give the contribution of other theorists and what all behaviorism talks about, and also close your answer with the merits and demerits of behaviorism, applications of behaviorism. Analytically assess Freud's theoretical framework and its impact on shaping the field of psychology. So in this case, you have to talk about entire psychodynamic approach. You have to start with the case of Anna O, talk about Freud, structure of personality, levels of consciousness, ego defense mechanisms, psychosexual stages, demerits of psychoanalysis, and also about the neo-Freudians. Then only you will be able to write an answer worth 20 marks. What do you understand by third force? Don't forget that third force means humanistic approach. It is also, third force is another name for humanistic approach of psychology. and discuss Carl Rogers' self psychology, real self, ideal self, the gap, frustration, make the diagram of real and ideal self. Then comes elucidate the core features and context of Indian psychology. This is in the first chapter, that how psychology has evolved in India right from the first psychology lab made in Calcutta by NN Sengupta, SN Sengupta. And then comes the section B, which is short notes, in which you have to talk about Maslow's needs hierarchy, which is very, very easy. So if it's for 10 marks, if you make a diagram and explain each of the needs for 2 marks each, you can easily fetch good scores. Then comes structuralism in psychology. We have to talk about uh, Titchener and William James. Sociological perspective of Karen Horney. Don't boggle by just reading sociological perspective. You ultimately have to write about the contribution of Karen Horney because of her critics about what Freud had talked about. Majorly, it is about her womb envy, and how the existence of women is also important. And Freud, the way Freud did not consider women as important, she had made that contribution, and considered the perspective of women. And then comes information processing of cognitive psychology. This is from your last section of behaviorism chapter, which comes even after neo behaviorism. And then comes existentialism, which we have just covered. Any other queries, please ask. If anyone wants to ask anything or pen down the questions, please let me know. Are you sure? Does anyone want to ask anything? You can speak or you can type so that your queries can be cleared. Okay, then if there are no queries coming up, we can call it for the day. Yes, Samit, I saw you just raised your hand. Please ask. Yes, Samita, please ask your query. You can speak or type as per your convenience.
Sorry, yeah, it wasn't letting me. Good evening, ma'am. I just wanted to ask one question. If the short notes come on a functionalism, like in structuralism, we write about Titchener and the two thinkers. In functionalism, there's so many. So do we write about all of them for 10 marks?
Okay, yes, it's a good question. See, I would only say that cover the major portions of their contribution. I'm not saying that go in depth because it's just 10 marks, but you should be, giving a crux of all their work.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Moreover, such questions, first of all, won't come because one who is making a question paper, he knows that he can't shrink the content so much that it should be compressed from 20 to 10 so easily. So such questions, first of all, won't even come. If if it's coming on functionalism, it would come as an application or merit or any one person's contribution. They will name the person.
Ma'am, I have a query as well.
Yes.
When we were discussing ego defense mechanism, there came 2 points which sounds slightly similar, but I think one is much more healthier than the other. First is rationalization, and then the intellectualization. As per me, intellectualization sounds more healthy approach, because in this the person is not completely rejecting their emotional pain, but they're genuinely trying to reason out that thing, that maybe someone is some going through something. But in rationalization, it's more of a excuse they try to give, they try to reason out with the excuse. Is it correct?
Okay, so see, intellectualization is more about, being abstract, being inclined towards the technical details of, fact so that you can avoid the feelings. It's more about being logical, technical, whereas rationalization is to justify your behavior. कि मैंने ऐसा किया इसीलिए किया. So if you are
Hmm.
saying I didn't want that job anyway, एक तो आपको जॉब नहीं मिली, यू कुडंट क्लियर दैट इंटरव्यू, ऊपर से आप कह
Hmm.
रहे हैं मुझे वैसे भी वो जॉब नहीं चाहिए थी, सो यू हैव जस्ट रैशनलाइज कि अच्छा है ना मुझे चाहिए ना मुझे मिले, सो इट्स
Hmm.
गोज क्वाइट सिंक्रोनस. वेराज इंटेलेक्चुअलाइजेशन का एग्जांपल आ सकता है लाइक एनालाइजिंग द स्टैटिस्टिक्स ऑफ अ डिजीज इंस्टेड ऑफ एक्नॉलेजिंग द फियर ऑफ डाइंग, कि अच्छा मैं मुझे तो मरने की चिंता है नहीं लेकिन मैं ये देख रहा हूँ कि इस बीमारी की वजह से कितने मर चुके हैं अभी तक, सो मेरे कितने चांसेस है.
And ma'am, also, like when we usually talk about sexuality or libido, it's in a very like our understanding is different as compared to Freud. Freud has broadened this understanding. When he talks about sexuality or libido, it's not just about the genitals or the intercourse. It's much more than that. Like he views literally everything with this particular instinct. Is that correct?
Yes. So actually, whatever he has understood in the context of sexuality only. उसी के
Hmm.
नजरिए से उसने सब कुछ समझा है. यहाँ सारे देखो स्टेजेस का नाम भी साइकोलॉजिकल स्टेजेस नहीं है. देखो एरिक्सन ने
Hmm.
कहे थे साइको सोशल स्टेजेस, फ्रॉइड ने
Yes.
तो साइको
Yes.
सेक्सुअल कहे हैं. So
Hmm.
his every way of living, every stage of life boils down
Hmm.
to sexuality only.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other query? I hope everyone could pen down the previous year questions. Okay, so if no one is responding, I can assume that we can call it for the day. Yes, Samita, please ask.
Sorry, that was my mistake. Sorry.
Okay, no issues. Fine, all the best for your internal assessments and your final exams. If you have any queries, you can still feel free to approach.